welcome to another episode of the SSD podcast. I'm really excited about this one, and I think you guys are going to be really thrilled because you heard me speak about it before, but you may not have got the details. And today, you're going to get the details. And so just a reminder, what do we talk about on the SSD podcast? We're talking about all kind of different ways that you can learn how to leverage. And why is leverage important? Because that's a favorite word of the wealthy, right? And if you don't know how to leverage, you slaving away. So today we have a special guest speaker, better known as Beez, right? Or Bjorn Hendricks, right? And but before I say anything else, I want to let our special guest introduce himself and please go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody for those who don't know you.
Yes, sir. Hey, first of all, thank you very much for having me on this podcast, man. It's long overdue because this conversation needs to happen. People need to hear more about it, bro. But my name is Bjorn Beez Hendricks. Yes, it is a Swedish name. I am not Swedish. That's why everybody calls me Beez, because many people couldn't pronounce Bjorn for some reason. But I've been in mergers and acquisitions for 20 plus years. 15 years in corporate America. I worked with one of the largest global consulting firms, Accenture. I also worked at Microsoft. And in my tenure, I was on teams to help businesses scale. One way to scale was through acquiring another business related to the business, right? And I would be on those teams to help deal with the merger. How do we merge the people, the processes, the teams? Right? How do we, the systems, everything that's on the two different businesses so that we could be cohesive and continue to grow. Then I've been the last 7 years completely in my entrepreneurial career, investing as a private investor, acquiring multiple businesses and, small businesses. I prefer the boring, essential businesses. So that's been, and when I say boring, it sounds weird, but yeah, most people don't think a pest control company is sexy. It's just boring, but it's recession proof. It continues making money. Everybody needs pest control, right? In 2020, everybody's stuck home. Pest control companies were still coming out. Even if they only had to do the outside, they still came out. Right. So those type of businesses are boring, essential, consistently producing money, and most importantly, can be turnkey for me. I don't have to work in it. Right. So I'm not going to be spraying people's houses, but I put managers in place. Everything is running without it. And it's just a passive revenue stream for me. And then we might as well rinse and repeat and get multiple of those.
So that's beautiful, but we're going to get into that. Don't talk about that part yet, because that's the climax. I think that's the part. If you stick around for this podcast, y'all, just so you can hear that part, that's going to be the climax of why you're here today. I can promise you that. Because, see, I too have been in business for over a decade. And one of the things that I thought is once I got my business down, I was like, okay, I got good at working on businesses or working in my business. I started learning later how to work on my business. And I thought I knew systems until I met Beez. Right? I had the pleasure of watching you work, and the way you're able to, it's almost like systems that oozes out of you. It's like a second nature, if you will. Would you say you would credit that to your experience in the corporate world, or is that something that you had naturally? Did you work on that? Where did that come from?
I'd have to say it is probably natural more so, but then strengthened through the corporate world. And when I say natural more so, I am somewhat OCD. I know I am, right? So, but it's because if I don't be OCD, then chaos ensues. I was just telling my daughter the other day, I said, if you don't want to lose something, always put it in the same place, right? So when I come home, the keys always go the exact same place. If the keys are lost, it's not because I lost it. Yeah. Somebody removed my keys from this part. And it was always weird because even in college, I used to have all these DVDs like in a DVD tower.
Tower. I remember them days.
Yeah,
I remember them days.
And I would come in and I'd be like, yo, who touched my DVDs? And my roommates would be like, yeah, how'd you know? like, because I have them in alphabetical order and I see one slot missing. So I know immediately. I don't even have to look through it. I glance and I'm like, wait, there's a slot missing. Wait a minute. Why is rush hour on the top when it's supposed to be on the bottom? You know? So being meticulous came natural, but then I had to make sure to do it for business, especially when you start, you know, investing in multiple businesses or running multiple businesses or multiple investments if it's not businesses. Then you got family, then you got this and that and everything. You got to put it on your calendar. You got to be as regimented, as meticulous as possible to prevent as many problems as possible.
Yes, indeed. Now, to that point, another thing you mentioned is you said you worked with Accenture and Microsoft for a while. Now, one of the questions I want to ask you is, while you were working with those companies, did you know that you were acquiring skills that you were going to use later, or were you just, you know, in the moment?
Oh, no, I had no idea. I was in the moment.
Okay.
I highly encourage everybody. Listen, I speak about entrepreneurship. I speak about time freedom. I speak about acquiring businesses, but I'm not shaming anyone that's in their 9 to 5, right? There's nothing wrong with it. If you're going to be in your 9 to 5, though, just make sure you have an additional stream of revenue somewhere else. Doesn't even have to be work. Maybe you have some sort of investment that's, you know, growing for you. You got to have other things, because if you only have one stream of revenue, that's too close to no streams of revenue. And if that gets pulled from you, you're going to be stuck, right?
Yes.
So overall, I'm not shaming anyone that's in their 9 to 5, but I want people to realize that they can acquire wealth. And we have strategies for doing it. You just need to execute. And then if you're going to execute, be more intentional than I was. You know, you want to be an entrepreneur, but you're not just ready yet to take that leap. Start paying attention more in what you're doing in your 9 to 5. Oh, SOPs? What's that? Standard operating procedures? Oh, it's interesting how the company always has everything that we do written down in a process. Yeah, maybe I need to understand how to write a process. Oh, it's interesting how they work these teams together and the communication systems that they're using between, you know, cross teams. Let me utilize that too. Let me use Slack in my business when I start, because I know that in my 9 to 5, they were using that and it was a great tool. So be intentional about it, because it's going to come in very useful when you get into being a full-time entrepreneur.
So to summarize what you're saying don't listen to hype and get excited and quit your job tomorrow. Create a plan and watch what's going on at your job and the systems that they're using at your job and the tools they're using at your job to see if you can implement that when you transition.
100%. If I had to give another quick addition into it, is if you are ready right now, I'm done, tired of my job, and I'm ready to go, but you don't have the money for it potentially, stay in the job a bit. Use the money from your job to be able to fund some of your transition into being an entrepreneur, right? Yeah. So just be intentional about what you want. Know what you want first and foremost, but then put together that plan to get to what you want. And don't forget the final step. Execute the plan. Too many people put together a plan and then it just sits there and nothing happens. Execute the plan and make it happen.
Okay. So you walk away from your job. Did you come into entrepreneurship right away, or did you come into acquiring businesses right away? What did that part of the journey look like for you? And what was the biggest adjustment you had to make?
So when I was in my job, I didn't think I could acquire businesses. I just knew that I knew what to do once you're acquiring and going through the process. I didn't think I could do it myself at the time. So I came out of Microsoft and I kind of did it on a whim. Don't do like me. Have your plan. I did it on a whim because I was pissed off. I was like, I was supposed to, I was traveling every week for meeting at client sites and such. And one week in particular, the client wasn't going to be there. So I was like, hey, can I just not travel this week? My son has a basketball game. I'd much rather be able to be there for it. And they were like, no. So I was like, but the client's not even going to be there. And then I realized, oh man, I'm begging you to spend time with my kids. Nah, this ain't gonna work. So I quit within the next 2 weeks. Yeah. I didn't know what the hell I was gonna do, to be honest. Excuse my language. I didn't know what was gonna happen. But I was fortunate that I had already kind of been doing a plan, and that plan was putting aside assets and money that could help me in an emergency. I had almost a year of I don't want to say savings, but I had almost a year worth of access to capital, whether it's I liquidated my 401k. I what else? Oh, my savings accounts, my index funds that I was trading in. I did different things, stock that Microsoft gave me. Most people were like, oh, don't touch your 401k. You don't want to do that. That's not good. You won't have nothing for retirement. I ain't had that much in there in the first place.
Yeah.
So really, I ain't gonna live on that in retirement. So me liquidating my 401k led me to making millions. Why wouldn't I do that?
Wow. So, okay, pause. So there's a lesson in this story, everybody. The average person is going to tell you never to touch that money. Why? Because the journey that the average person is taking is the one we were all told. Get good grades, graduate, get a good job, boom, you'll have the American dream. But if you want to step off that path, you got to do things irregular to that path. Hence, with Beez, he pulled money from his 401k, liquidated it, liquidated his stocks, because he bet on himself and he was going to be able to make a bigger return, a better return, because he's using the money versus just waiting for it to grow somewhere else.
Yep.
I just had to make sure I highlighted that part. That's phenomenal.
For sure. And I ain't liquidated and then say, oh, let me go buy some new Jordans.
Come on now.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to be really disciplined, right? You have to say, okay, what am I doing? Why am I going to do it? And what's the elements of it, the aspects of it? Because I also knew that, I'll make way more than in my 401k if I liquidate it. But I have to also know, well, what comes with liquidating it? Oh, I'm gonna get taxed because I ain't had no trust or nothing at the time. So I got taxed on it for taking out, for cashing out my 401k. I got taxed on or capital gains tax on the stock that I sold. I got all types of things happen, but it was still worth it to me because I looked at it as a whole and said, okay, what can I do? Now to answer your specific question of what did I do when I came out of after Microsoft, I went into e-commerce. I came across a potential deal to sell some goods from China. And I was like, okay, I could do this. And then I started looking into it more. And then I realized that private labeling, so that was wholesaling. But I realized that private labeling was a little bit more lucrative and long-term sustainable. So I went into that. Within 18 months, I made my first $1 million. And, some people be like, oh, 18 months is a long time. Not really, and don't.
How long will it take for you to make $1 million at your job? That's my response.
There you go. And don't fall for people who are like, hey, I can show you how to make $1 million in 3 minutes. Listen, easy come money, easy go money, right? So don't go for those plays. I always say, you already know, bro. I always say, I don't do or teach plays. I only do or teach sustainable strategies that aren't going anywhere, right? Because plays get played out. So I got into e-commerce, made good money, and then I sold 2 brands. Once I sold those, because I was putting in systems in place. Everything was running. I didn't want to have to do the work every day. So I started putting in systems in place so that other people could do it for me. That's when I first came across hiring someone from the Philippines, which eventually led to me opening a whole HR and staffing firm, right? Because I had to do it for myself first. I was like, I can't afford an employee right now. Oh, but the cost of labor from the Philippines was a little bit lower because the cost of living was lower, and I could still pay them well, but it's way less than it is here. So that helped me get a head start in the business and to start growing it. And then I had to, it was so turnkey, I was able to sell it. Sell 2 of them. And from that moment, I was like, okay, hold up. If I could sell businesses, I might as well be buying them too. I already know the whole process. I was doing it all during corporate America. Now I'm like almost 2 years in to, being a full-time entrepreneur. And that's when I said, hey, time to go ahead and start buying businesses.